Chapter 24. Nobody's too old for a psychic. A few years back in the central provinces of India, your Alpt Savit had just climbed up a tree in the black of night. He had walked through a few miles of cobras to achieve this tree, quaking in his boots all the way because a jungle is scary at night, even without snakes. But there was a natural kill near the tree. A big domesticated buffalo that the biggest tiger in the world had knocked off that afternoon. He had been driven off his kill before he had a chance to get stuck into it, and it was a cinch he'd return. They still do a lot of night shooting in India, sitting up for tigers and leopards over baits, shooting indiscriminately from cars with lights, and I didn't like it, even when hunting villainous varmints, and this particular tiger was a veteran cattle lifter that was decimating the Gond villagers' herds, and would certainly turn into a natural man-eater when he got too decrepit to kill animals, or eventually panic-kill a herdsman and developed a swift taste for man-meat. I was crouched uncomfortably on a rough tree branch McCann, forbidden to smoke, scratch, cough, or think, but as the mosquitoes chawed on me, I broke one rule and began to think about the old man and why I didn't care for night hunting and never would. If you want to hunt, hunt, the old man once said. If you want to be a murderer, be a murderer. Buy yourself a cheap flashlight or a headlight for the car and drive easy through the rye fields or the corn. Pick up some green eyes with your light, fire between the eyes, and when the eyes go out, pick up your deer. You won't know whether it's a buck, a doe, or fawn, and sneak it home. Venison's venison, tastes the same to a hunter or to a murderer. Only don't let me catch you at it. You might as well take up highway robbery. You ain't too old yet for a touch of Hickory Psychic. Hickory Psychic was a whippy switch across the bottom. The old man was a fanatic on conservation of game and obedience to the game laws, which he said were the first three rungs on the ladder of conservation. Oh, maybe we might have committed a little indirect poaching, such as the calling of somebody else's turkeys from across the road into legal no man's land, which I've already mentioned, and I used to be pretty handy poaching squirrels off some government property, but the squirrels weren't doing the government any good by just sitting there eating up the pecans. But by and large, we were kind of model hunters, even to keeping a season tally of birds shot, and this at a time when the meat hunters thought nothing of exceeding the limit a dozen times over, or murdering the best part of a covey of quail on the ground. But like all young'uns with enough pimples to rate the driver's license, I hit the nocturnal daredevil stage, and one night a bunch of us hellions decided we would go jacklight a deer just to see what it was like. We rigged a big searchlight, which we borrowed from the pilot launch, onto the new Model A Liz, loaded the shotguns, and went on the prod. Not too far out of town there were some rye fields, fresh and green, where whole herds of deer came to graze the winter crop, and we told each other that we were practically doing the farmers a favor, you know. St. Patrick chasing out the snakes, St. George knocking off the dragon. We cruised along, flashing the light across the level fields, and after an hour or so we hit onto a constellation of eyes that showed green and sometimes red under the lamp's beam. A sizable herd of deer had come out from their lying-up beds in the swamp to take on the night's provisions. They stopped grazing and stood transfixed, pinioned in the yellow trap of light. We drew alongside, and I picked out the closest pair of eyes and fired between them. They went out like a suddenly extinguished bulb. At the sound of the shot, the other lights disappeared, and you could hear the crash of antlers as they hit the nearest brush. The flashlight showed us a nice young spike buck, stone dead on the ground. The Model A coupe had a kind of luggage compartment on the back. We opened it up and slung the murdered animal into it. Then we drove back to town feeling like a bunch of thugs who had stuck up a bank and killed the teller as well. As we hit the town, we saw that the car needed some gas. Just as we pulled up to the pump, the damnedest bot you had ever heard come out of the hind end, and there was enough thumping and bumping and thrashing around to wake the dead. Bob, blat, bump, crash, wallop, bob, blat. Obviously, our corpse had been merely stunned and had just come alive. The filling station attendant looked as startled as we did, and as for me, the neck hair stood up like 10-penny nails. Old refrains of Birmingham jail and prisoner's song and In the Jailhouse Now began to creep into my subconscious as we gunned the Model A out of there for the deep timber. Naturally, we ran out of gas. Now here was a predicament. black night with no gas on a country road, and a live buck deer threatening to tear the Liz to tin shreds. And suddenly the brave freebooters were three scared kids facing life in jail plus an extra life of shame. But in the meantime, how do you get a live deer out of the tail end of a Model A Ford coupe? When you're a criminal, you seek a partner in crime. In case Hardened Crook always turns to his own sort for comfort. I inspected the terrain and remembered that about a mile down the road dwelt some gentlemen who lived by the manufacture and sale of an illegal specific against nervous tremors, namely white mule. If one or both of the brothers were not off working for the state, as they called the jolt in jail, we might expect some criminal assistance, since their smokehouse generally consisted of venison that had not been acquired under the law's strictest letter. Junis, a lean, lantern-jawed, bristle-chinned buccaneer, was cradling a jug on the front porch of his ramshackle cabin. F, he informed us, was off on a romantic errand involving the nearest neighbor's daughter, Miss Sarah Jane, aged 16, and he'd be back and he got done. We dispatched a courier to the tumble-down manse of Miss Sarah Jane, aged 16, and tore F from the arms of his beloved, for this was a tricky technical job. Junis loaded a spare demijohn of gas into his creaky old T-model, and the task force proceeded toward the liberation. It was quite simple, actually. F crawled up on the top of our car with a noose in his hand. Junis opened the back end cautiously, and when the young buck stuck his head out, F snagged it with a lasso, drew taut, and Junis dropped the compartment top on the buck's neck. For a split second, until Junis cut its throat with one slash of a clasp knife that had been so frequently honed that its blade showed an inner curve, the buck looked like a picture of a mounted deer head, only the wall was the tail end of a car. "You fellers want this critter?" F asked. Three of us hollered together, "No!" "We'll take him then," Junis said. We drove silently, guiltily back to town and disappeared without saying good night. I avoided the old man the next morning after a sleepless night, but just after the noon meal, which I picked at, he collared me. "Any true to this stuff about the deer you fellers jacklit that come alive in the car? There are different versions all over town." I saw there wasn't any use trying to lie out of it, because the old man had a beagle nose for news. "I'm afraid it's true," I said. "It ain't gonna happen again." The old man gave me a look that would have put out a forest fire. "I'll say it won't," he snapped. "Not unless you can manage to break jail and do it. Come on, murderer," he said. "We're going to see the warden." We got in the car and drove off. The warden was in the pool room. The old man waited until he finished his game, and then he said, "Jack, if you'd step outside a minute." When the warden was outside, the old man said, "I just caught a criminal for you. Do your duty. You got any handcuffs?" The warden said no, he didn't have any, but he could borrow some mighty quick if the criminal was dangerous. "I think he's dangerous," the old man said. "He's an accessory to murder, car theft, night hunting, and use of a stolen searchlight on a murder car." Maybe he's repented," the warden said. "This is a first offense, ain't it?" "Yes, I suppose so," the old man said, "unless you count them watermelons he stole a couple of months back, also at night." "Well, hell," the warden said. "I get a bet on this next game. I parole him into your custody, Ned, and you can deal with him as you see fit, all right?" "If you say so," the old man answered. "It'll save the state some money." He never spoke all the way home. He said when we got there, "You go back to the garage and wait for me." Then he went into the house and came back with a whippy Malacca cane somebody'd given him. "Take down your pants," he said, "and bend over." Sitting in this tree waiting for this tiger, my behind began to hurt double, and it wasn't this makeshift McCann that made it hurt. The old man really laid into me with that cane, but even that didn't hurt as much as his icy contempt, which lasted 3 or 4 days until he figured I'd served my sentence and was due to be admitted to society again. That cured me of night hunting until now, when Khan Sahib punched me. The tiger had come silently to the bait. We let him feed for 10 minutes, and then Khan Sahib snapped the flash on him. He had a head as big as a bushel basket, and his enormous ruff was bloody. He looked balefully into the light. I drew a bead on his neck as he lay on the buffalo, eating from aft to fore, and the 470 boomed. He collapsed without moving, a rug with his head pillowed on the buffalo's hindquarters. I started to shoot him again. No, Khan Sahib said. Don't spoil the skin. He's dead, like the others. He yoo-hooed for the distant boys to come let us down out of the tree. This was Tiger 3 in 10 days, all big, but this time the biggest, and the only one shot at night. I forgot the old man. This was the biggest tiger I'd ever heard of, from his pug marks and the sight I had of his head. I had a flask in the tree. We celebrated. Let's look at him again, I said about 20 minutes later. Khan Sahib snapped on the light. There was a growl, and I saw a tail disappear into the high grass. The tiger had been dead 20 minutes, had come to life. He'd been creased and only stunned. We hunted that tiger for 2 days with buffalo and never came close. He'd quit bleeding inside 100 yards. The late Jack Roach of Houston, Texas, saw him a couple of weeks later, and Jack said that as far as he could make out through the glasses, the cat had a fully healed scar, mere hair off the top of the spine. It did me no good to reflect that Karamoja Bell, the famous elephant hunter, once cut the tail off a brain-shot bull and returned a few hours later to find the bull had got up and gone tailless, and that everybody who ever hunted has made at least one damn fool mistake. All I could think of was that buck deer carrying on and blatting in the back of the Liz, and the old man's rattan walking stick swishing on my backside. From that point on, you could offer me a hairy mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger staked out and tied to a tree at night, and get a very sharp, profane no for an answer. Daytime hunting is for hunters, and nighttime hunting is for animals. But wherever the hunting grounds the old man inhabits, I'll bet he was laughing fit to kill the night when that big tiger got up and calmly walked away.